Hello and welcome to HBM's Crypto-Corner for Wednesday, January 18th, 2023. We have a few things to talk about, so let's get started. First of all, yesterday was the 5th anniversary of the passing of John Bindernagel. And right now I'm currently reading his biography, Sasquatch Discovered, which is really good. It's a really good book. And I just hope that we will always remember Dr. Bindernagel and his positive contributions to the Sasquatch mystery. I'm hopeful that he will not be forgotten. And I don't think he will be. I think his contributions will last for years and years to come. Here we go, the weird wake phenomenon behind many Loch Ness Monster sightings. The 1958 image above depicts one of the more common kinds of Loch Ness Monster sightings, described by the photographer Peter A. McNabb as a black or dark enormous water creature cruising on the surface of the lake. Writing in The Skeptic, Stuart Campbell explains that these kinds of hump sightings and photos may be the result of an unusual wake phenomenon called a Kelvin wake, peculiar to long and deep narrow lakes used by heavy vessels, such as Loch Ness. From The Skeptic, the wave front of a Kelvin wake is complicated, consisting of a series of waves apparently traveling at an angle to the wake itself. This accounts for the series of peaks in the above photo. They themselves can be mistaken for a monster. The phenomenon I referred to is caused by the fact that in such lakes, particularly if they have steep shores, wakes would be reflected back. Loch Ness is a prime example. A reflected Kelvin wake can then, traveling back from the shore as if they themselves came from a vessel, interfere with the vessel's own wakes, even with the screw wake caused by the ship's propeller. The result can be what we might call a standing wave, a wave maintaining its appearance, appearing to have its own identity and movement as it is continually fed by various wakes. However, this phenomenon needs an almost flat, calm water surface in what some call Nessie weather. Nessie sightings often occur in calm weather, because that is when these wake effects can be seen. Those strange humps seen in the above image, likely a Kelvin wake caused by an icebreaker tug that turned around in Loch Ness's Urquhart Bay. It's interesting. Very interesting. Could this wake phenomenon be the explanation for some Loch Ness Monster supposed sightings? I think so, but I don't think it accounts for all of them. I mean, what about the eyewitness accounts that swear they've seen something in the lake in Loch Ness? I mean, are they all mistaken identity? Are they all this Kelvin wake? I don't think so. I think some of them, I think, are credible. Not all, but some. But you have to be careful of what you're looking for and what you're looking at. Make sure you're not seeing a Kelvin wake or something or some natural phenomenon. That's just a bit of advice. Now here's something interesting. Video. Bigfoot to be sent to the moon. Local artist's Bigfoot creation is headed into space. If I get the video to work.
New tonight for you here in this half hour, the work of a local artist during the COVID lockdown in 2020 will soon be archived in an interesting location. John Monk with the details.
Just before most of the country shut down during the COVID pandemic in early 2020, Dan Chadinsky, a local artist and sculptor from Fremont, started a big project. He was tasked with creating a larger-than-life sculpture of Bigfoot for an exhibit at the Norman Rockwell Museum in Massachusetts.
So the challenge was, can I do something in high resolution, hyper realistic detail that when you approach in a gallery will still make the hair on the back of your neck stand up.
Dan worked with 400 pounds of clay to make a mold, then finished the silicone exterior with paint, then taxidermy hair, installing each hair by hand for 3 weeks. After the initial exhibit, the finished sculpture has won multiple Best in Show awards, and Dan was recently informed his sculpture won a top honor at the 16th International Art Renewal Center Salon Competition.
They said, we're going to be putting an image of him in a time capsule on the South Pole of the moon.
As a winner, an image of Dan's sculpture will be etched into nickel microfilm, which will be sent to the moon as part of the Lunar Codex Contemporary Art Archive Initiative. Dan says he is humbled at the honor and hopes his accomplishments as a local artist can inspire future artists here in Northwest Ohio.
And knowing now that I'll never be able to look at the moon the same way, I'll know that I did leave a mark there, a big footprint on the moon. That's pretty extraordinary.
The launch window for sending the microfilm with his image to the moon will be set for either the fall or winter of 23 and will be live streamed so you can watch when it happens. Reporting from Fremont, I'm John Monk, WTOL 11.
Wow, that's pretty interesting. It's pretty cool, too. That's very cool. Here's the story. The legendary Bigfoot will soon go where no cryptid has gone before by way of an art archive to be housed on, of all places, the moon. Sasquatch's unlikely journey into space reportedly began when Ohio sculptor Dan Chadinsky crafted a massive bust of the beast for the Norman Rockwell Museum in Massachusetts. Tasked with creating something in high-resolution, hyper-realistic detail that when you approach it in a gallery, it still makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up, the artist succeeded brilliantly with his sizable piece, Evasive Species, which depicts the hirsute head of Bigfoot complete with a set of menacing teeth and eerie eyes. Chadinsky's work wound up winning multiple awards in art competitions around the country, and eventually caught the attention of a project known as Lunar Codex. The enterprising initiative aims to send a series of time capsules containing works from 30,000 contemporary artists, writers, musicians, and filmmakers from 137 countries to the moon over the next 2 years. Although chosen to be a part of the project, actually launching the massive bust into space is not quite possible just yet. So Chadinsky's piece was photographed and then that image was embossed onto nickel microfilm. The unique copy of the work will be included in a lunar codex that will be launched later this year and ultimately rests on the south pole of the lunar surface. Reflecting on the unique achievement, Chadinsky mused that you want to create something that outlasts you, something that is meaningful. Knowing now that I'll never be able to look at the moon the same way, I'll know that I did leave a mark there, a big footprint on the moon. That's pretty extraordinary. Echoing those thoughts, Scott Cunningham, who snapped the photo used for the Microsoft microfilm engraving, marveled that who knows who was going to see it in subsequent decades, years, centuries. To that end, while human astronauts may someday reach the lunar codex and recognize the iconic cryptid, one can only imagine what aliens might think should they stumble upon the archive and find Sasquatch snarling back at them. So this is very cool. I mean, to have just even an image of a Sasquatch on the moon, even if it's not the bust itself. I mean, it's unique. It's revolutionary. That's pretty darn cool. And here's a cool story. The scientist Grover Krantz risked it all chasing Bigfoot. The dedicated anthropologist donated his body to science and it's on display, but his legacy is complicated. Here's a picture of Grover Krantz with one of his, well, actually, that was his beloved Irish wolfhound, Clyde, and their bones are in the Smithsonian. As the first serious scientist to study the legendary creature, Krantz risked his career and reputation on a subject that many consider a joke. And while the museum remembers him as a man who loved science so much that he donated his body to it, another community remembers Krantz as a pioneer in the study of Sasquatch. In a sentimental tribute to a man and his best friend, the skeleton of anthropologist Grover Krantz and his dog, Clyde, is on view at the Smithsonian's National Museum of Natural History in Washington, D.C. Enclosed in a glass display case in the museum's interactive educational space for teens, Krantz's skeleton holds his dog Clyde's articulated bones in what looks like a warm embrace. The skeletons serve as both a testament to a man's fondness for his pet and Krantz's everlasting commitment to his work as an anthropologist. He knew that he was dying of pancreatic cancer and wanted to be articulated and put on exhibit, says David Hunt, a forensic and physical anthropologist who carried out Krantz's request to donate his body to science. He said, "Well, I've been a teacher all my life, so I might as well be one when I'm dead." Krantz, who died in 2002, spent decades as a professor of anthropology at Washington State University, but his legacy is far more complicated than that of a beloved teacher. Today, more than a decade after his death, actually more than 2 decades now, this story was from 2018, Krantz is known in various circles as an eccentric anthropologist who believed in Bigfoot. His work as a cryptozoologist, or a person who studies mythic creatures and tries to prove their existence, was serious, public, and professionally damaging. Krantz published 10 books. Several were on anthropological topics like human evolution, and 5 were on Bigfoot. I think he was sort of seen as an embarrassment to the anthropology department at Washington State, says Laura Krantz, a journalist and distant cousin of Grover, who is documenting his life in the serial podcast called Wild Thing. Both Asian and North American oral traditions and cultures have accounts of an ape-like creature. Bigfoot is often referred to as Sasquatch, a term borrowed from native communities in the northwestern part of the United States. And Himalayan folklore has accounts of the Yeti, also known as the abominable snowman. I think a lot of his colleagues kind of rolled their eyes at him, and he was the butt of jokes, says Laura Krantz. Even now in anthropology circles, there are still wisecracks made about Grover Krantz. While his colleagues may not have taken him seriously, Krantz tried to earn his Bigfoot research some legitimacy by using his background as an expert in human evolution to make the case for the creature that most agree is a myth. Bigfoot is a large, massive, hairy, bipedal higher primate. You could describe it as a gigantic man covered with hair and being rather stupid, or an oversized, upright walking gorilla, he said in a local TV news interview in the 1990s. Krantz had never claimed to see Bigfoot himself. Instead, he spoke to people who said they did and examined clues he found in the wilderness. Anytime he heard anybody talking about Bigfoot, he would get in a big old 66 Cadillac, Hunt says, and he'd drive over and he would try to make casts of the Bigfoot footprints and hear what people had to say. He would bring the casts back to his lab and study them. Eventually, Krantz used the clues he had to draw conclusions about Bigfoot's evolutionary history. He believed that Bigfoot was descended from an ancient ape out of Asia called Gigantopithecus and that existed about 1 million years ago, Laura Krantz says. It had potentially come over the Bering Land Bridge when sea level was very low and migrated with a lot of other animals that came over at the time. But no number of corroborating myths, casts, or eyewitness accounts would lead the scientific community to accept the ape-like creature's existence. Without a body, Bigfoot would be accepted as no more than lore. And Krantz knew that. After all, how could there be no physical proof of a creature that is believed to have existed for centuries? And how can an animal that Krantz said is between 600 and 800 pounds and 6 to 8 feet tall be so elusive? They're not going to accept the existence of the Sasquatch until definitive evidence comes in, Krantz said in a TV interview. They're taking a legitimate skeptical attitude. They want to see the definitive proof of a body or a piece of one. Today, the description next to the display case of Grover Krantz and his dog Clyde's bones at the Smithsonian's National Museum of Natural History identifies him as an anthropologist who loved his dogs. In addition to Clyde, Krantz had also preserved the bones of his 3 other dogs, Icky, Yahoo, and Lika. And though there is no public mention or endorsement of the mythic creature that Krantz spent decades studying, a quick Google search of his name will yield a complex, sometimes confusing legacy, as legacies so often are, of a man who was scorned by his colleagues and valorized by both superstitious and reluctant Bigfoot believers. The skeletons of Grover Krantz and his dog are on display in the Curious Lab at the Smithsonian's National Museum of Natural History in Washington, D.C. So, I don't know how I missed this article. I have no idea. How did I miss this? But it's very cool. It's very fair, I think. I think it's a fair article. I think it's pretty fair to Grover Krantz and to Sasquatch, even if the Smithsonian thinks it's all a myth. Finally, I want to share my review of Freeman Bigfoot Files by Michael Freeman. Wonderful tribute to a much maligned Bigfooter. Paul Freeman is a name that garners quite a bit of controversy when mentioned to a good bit of Bigfooters. He has been unfairly maligned as a hoaxer based on his incredible luck in finding evidence and sightings and also his abortive 1987 Good Morning America interview where he said he faked tracks. But he was taken out of context because he was describing that he faked tracks to make comparisons to real tracks. But GMA edited his interview to make it seem like he was just a hoaxer. Freeman's research was just a result of his absolute dedication and chance encounters, not because of hoaxing. This book is dedicated to Paul and is almost a love letter from a son to a father. Not only does Michael write about his father, but also Dr. Jeff Meldrum, Cliff Barackman, Dar Addington, and Tom Powell all write positively about Paul Freeman. In addition, there are QR codes with rare videos and audio of Freeman and his research. There are also rare photographs and newspaper clippings in the book. This book is terrific and belongs on every cryptozoological bookshelf. 10 out of 10. And I do highly recommend you get a copy of this. It's on HangerOnePublishing.com. Just, I guess you do a Google search for that. I'm not sure if it's on Amazon yet or not. I think it might be, but I'm not 100% sure. Don't quote me on that. I know Hanger One Publishing has copies of it. I believe also, yes, Cliff Barackman's museum, North American Bigfoot Center, has copies of it. Maybe sold out by now, though. I'm not sure. But I think recently they had copies of it. Whether they still have copies of it or not, I don't know. I do recommend it. It's really, really a wonderful book. And I think Paul Freeman was just so unfairly maligned. No, the man was not a hoaxer. He just happened to get really, really lucky. I know Grover Krantz said, yeah, usually a person only has one sighting in their lifetime. But Paul Freeman was so dedicated, he got out in the woods so much that he was able to have multiple encounters. And would that all Sasquatch researchers have that sort of dedication? Paul Freeman was just able to have multiple encounters because he was out there quite a bit. He got out. He got out there. He got out in the field, and I wish more Bigfooters could have the success that he had. I really do. But there's just not too many that are that committed these days. Mainly because of time and money and other factors. But still, I do highly recommend the book. And that's going to do it for this week. I want to thank you very much for tuning in. You guys are the heart of the show. I always say that, but I always mean it. Now, I'll continue to do this as long as you guys want me to. And hey, until next week, y'all be good or be good at. This is HBM's Crypto Corner.